As you know, during World War II, Spain remained a neutral power, although its sympathies leaned towards Hitler and the Axis. Ideologically, Spain was more aligned with Mussolini's Italy, but it held respect and admiration for Hitler's Germany, particularly due to the military and logistical support it had received from both nations during its civil war. So, if Spain had joined the Axis, what would have happened? Would the outcome of World War II have been any different? Would it have lasted longer or shorter? Or was it ultimately a really smart decision for Spain to stay out? First, we need to consider Spain's position in the world at the outbreak of the war. The country had just emerged from a brutal 3-year civil war, and it left its economy devastated and its military absolutely exhausted. Under Francisco Franco, Spain's fresh dictator, Spain had adopted a fascist-style government, though without the extreme racial ideologies present in Nazi Germany. It was more like the proto-fascist states within Eastern Europe and Italy at the time, or the authoritarian regime of nearby Portugal. For Franco, the events unfolding in Europe put Spain in a delicate position. The fall of Poland in September 1939, followed by the rapid conquest of France, Denmark, the Low Countries, and Norway by May and June 1940, shocked the world. For some, it signaled that fascism was the new world order and here to stay. And the idea of a great power like France being overrun in little more than a month seemed absolutely inconceivable. While many feared and panicked, Franco watched on with keen interest. Italy had just joined the invasion of France, aligning itself with Hitler directly. So, should Spain have done the same? In June 1940, Franco wrote to Hitler expressing interest in joining the war on the Axis side, provided that Germany helped Spain expand its colonial empire. Whether this was a genuine request or merely Franco trying to position himself favourably and be a Hitler fanboy remains debatable. What isn't debatable though is that soon afterwards, a Spanish occupation force also moved into the Tangier International Zone following the fall of France, an action perceived by the Allies as very aggressive. It was seen as a potential precursor to Spain joining the Axis. However, Franco stopped short of outright annexation of the territory and called it a temporary wartime measure. In October 1940, Heinrich Himmler visited Spain to arrange a meeting between Franco and Hitler later that month. His visit was marred by an embarrassing incident when his wallet and personal belongings were stolen, a small but telling sign of Spain's lukewarm commitment to Nazi Germany. The crucial meeting took place later that month in Hendaye, France. I've probably butchered the name, but anyway. Franco seemingly overplayed his hand, demanding way too much in exchange for Spanish involvement in the war. He demanded fortification of the Canary Islands, which he knew he couldn't defend from the British, control of French Morocco and parts of French Algeria, Gibraltar, economic aid, and massive military support. Hitler, eager to maintain good relations with Vichy France, found Franco's demands very excessive. It remains uncertain whether Franco deliberately made unrealistic demands to avoid entering the war, or if he truly needed those concessions to commit. Hitler later complained to Mussolini that dealing with Franco was so frustrating that he would rather pull out 3 or 4 teeth than negotiate with him again. The meeting ended in a stalemate, though an agreement was made that Spain could join the Axis at a later date, and that Franco would receive territories in Africa at some point. That was it. Hitler did keep sending messages to Franco throughout 1940 and 1941, bringing up the issue of Gibraltar and asked if he could send German troops through Spain to attack it. Franco refused this and the idea eventually died down. In February 1941, Hitler encouraged Franco to meet with Mussolini to see if they could also come to some sort of more refined agreement. This failed to eventuate into anything. The most that Spain ultimately did do was sign in the Anti-Comintern Pact, and offered limited support to the Axis, such as sending the Blue Division to fight the Soviet Union. Officially though, it maintained neutrality during the war. If Franco had decided to follow up on the offer to join the Axis in Hendaye in October 1940, or where the most likely point of divergence could have taken place, the immediate consequences would have been significant. One of the first and most immediate effects of Spain joining the Axis would have likely been the fall of Gibraltar. With Spain actively fighting alongside Germany, the British stronghold at Gibraltar would have come under direct attack from both Spanish and German forces. Losing Gibraltar would have severely weakened the British naval power in the Mediterranean, limited their ability to resupply forces in North Africa, and beyond there. With Gibraltar lost, the British hold on Malta, a crucial resupply and strategic point in the Mediterranean, would have been even more precarious. The Axis had already tried and failed to take Malta multiple times, but with increased resources, better coordination, and a weakened British naval presence, it's likely that Malta would have eventually fallen. I would predict this to happen at some point in 1941, when Greece and Yugoslavia get occupied by the Axis, but before the invasion of the Soviet Union, so probably around May or June 1941. Spain's entry into the war would have also provided additional troops and resources for the Axis, which would strengthen German and Italian efforts in North Africa. The British campaign to push the Axis out of the region, which was already hard fought, would have been significantly more difficult. The North African campaign, instead of ending in 1943, might have lasted much longer and diverted Allied resources from other fronts. Considering the war readiness of the Spanish though immediately after the Civil War, it's unlikely that the Spanish would have realistically been hardened soldiers, but would they have been as useless as the Italian forces? It's anyone's guess. Their main focus would have been to safeguard North Africa from British and American intrusion, and maybe send troops to defend Spain and France from, again, British and American intrusion, which would have come in the form of a D-Day, or not though, because while the war in Africa might have dragged on, the European theatre could have seen an earlier end. If Spain had joined the Axis, the Allies might have invaded through the Iberian Peninsula instead of focusing on Italy first. A successful Allied invasion of Spain could have provided an alternative route into southern France, accelerating the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany. Germany would have probably fallen by late 1944 or early 1945 if this was the case, and they still would have focused heavily on fighting the Soviets in the East as a number one priority, as Hitler hated communism more than anything. Well, besides maybe one other thing. Spain's leader himself, Franco, would have probably ran all the way to Berlin, probably alongside some loyalist troops. Ultimately though, he would probably meet the same fate as Mussolini or Hitler. I don't think Franco was escaping to Argentina in this timeline, and his Spanish would have definitely stuck out. As far as Hitler's anti-Semitic policies extending to Spain, I would imagine that Franco would just ignore most of them or not be compliant. While Spain had historically banished their Jewish population in 1492, Franco's regime was not openly anti-Semitic, despite what he might have personally thought behind closed doors, and aligned more with countries like Italy in regards to how it would have handled its Jewish population, which, because of the exodus in the 15th century, was quite small. Franco probably would have disregarded Hitler's wishes to send Jews to occupied Europe, much like Hitler's ally of Bulgaria. With an earlier end to the war though, the Soviet push into Eastern and Central Europe might have not advanced as far. An extra front for Germany, on the Western Front at that, could have limited Soviet expansion into Europe. Consequently, countries such as Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Albania, and Hungary even might have avoided falling under Soviet influence and significantly altering the European landscape after World War II. Germany would also not be split into two. So, Spain's neutrality in World War II was, in hindsight, a pragmatic decision for the Franco regime. If you hated Franco though, or were a political dissident in Spain, or maybe even an Eastern European that barely fell to Soviet occupation after World War II, like someone in East Germany or Hungary, maybe you would have loved if Franco had decided to enter World War II. I guess you would have never known though. Let's not forget that Franco's Spain was the last fascist European state. It lasted until 1975. He wasn't hot-headed or caught FOMO like Mussolini, which I've talked about in this video here, you should check it out. But he was definitely the most rational leader out of the Axis wartime leaders. For Spain, the country was too economically and militarily weak to contribute meaningfully to the Axis war effort without massive German support, which Hitler was unwilling to provide until it was too late. While the Spanish entry into the war might have had major strategic consequences for the Allies, especially in the Mediterranean, it's unlikely to have altered the overall outcome of the war. Instead, it would have prolonged certain battles while potentially shortening others. Franco ultimately played his hand well, securing Spain's sovereignty while subtly aiding the Axis when convenient. His decision to remain neutral allowed Spain to avoid the destruction that many other European countries suffered, ensuring the survival of his regime long after the war ended. What do you think, guys? Do you think Franco was going to save Hitler, or would he have just been another Mussolini 2.0? Let me know your comments and feel free to like and sub. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.